Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we do some winter sowing. So let's go. Today is February 13th, and here where I live, it is still quite cold. Our daytime temperatures are just barely reaching freezing, and our nighttime temperatures are in the teens. So it's still a perfect time for me to be sowing my perennial seeds. Now, it's going to depend on where you live and what your temperatures are. So keep in mind, when it comes to sowing perennials, you want to make sure that they get a long enough cold, moist stratification period. And that's going to vary from perennial to perennial. I've had a lot of luck during the last few years starting the winter sowing process with perennials, beginning with the end of December and doing this process all the way through the middle of March. But it is going to depend on your zip code and your last frost date and your temperature conditions. So just keep that in mind. And even though I've already made a few videos showing you the winter sowing process, in case you haven't seen those videos or in case you want to see what I'm sowing today, I figured I might as well just take you along and show you the new seeds that I'm going to be sowing. Now, I call them new. They're new to me. Some of these seeds are seeds that I've never winter sown before. However, all these seeds are seeds that I collected either from my garden or from other people's gardens. What I like about that process is that I save a lot of money. When you buy your perennial seeds, which is a totally fair way to do it, typically in a packet of seeds, you might only get so many seeds. But when you collect your own seeds, number one, it's free. And number two, you can collect a ton of seeds that way. So that's what I've been doing over the last few years, is just collecting my own seeds. And it's really been working out well for me. So today we're going to be winter sowing 5 milk jugs. And you really don't need a lot of supplies when you winter sow. What I like about the winter sowing process is that you don't need grow lights. You really just need nature to do its thing. You need to check on the milk jugs. You need to keep them well watered. And also, it's a very cheap, low way of starting seeds. So to get started, you need some sort of a container that holds soil. I've had a lot of luck using milk jugs. And what I've been doing for the last few years is actually I've been saving the milk jugs each year. So first of all, we're recycling, which is a great thing. But what better way to recycle than to use these milk jugs for a few years? And also what I've found is that I end up running out of milk jugs. I don't know, we drink a lot of milk, but still we just never seem to have enough milk jugs. And yes, I can ask maybe local coffee shops or friends or family for milk jugs. But I've found that between collecting my own milk jugs or water jugs, as well as saving previous year's milk jugs, that's saved me a lot of milk jugs to work with. But you don't have to use a milk jug. You just need to use some sort of container that lets in light, so it can either be clear or semi-clear. And it should hold about 4 inches of soil. And then it should have something that drains water from the bottom and allows water to come in from the top. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn this milk jug into a mini greenhouse. I have tin snips here that I'm going to use to cut this milk jug, but you can use anything that allows you to make the cut through the milk jug. So I am just going to start by making one cut into the milk jug. And when I make the first cut, I want to make sure I'm making it high enough so that, again, I can hold about 4 inches of soil in here. But I don't want to make it too high, because if you make it too high, you're not able to then use this handle here as a hinge. So make sure you're doing it about halfway. And then what I'm going to do is just go ahead and keep cutting. And you want to stop right here where the handle is. And I'm going to cut on the other side. And again, I'm stopping right where the handle is. And the whole reason why you want to have this type of hinge here is as the winter is ending and as we're getting into the spring season and it's starting to get hot, our greenhouse is going to get hot. So we need to be able to let some air in here. And that's the whole reason for having some sort of way of opening up our greenhouse. Now, notice I took the cover off and I threw that away. At a minimum, you need to have some sort of way to let water or snow get into this container. And just leaving this one area open is usually fine, but I like to add additional holes in the top just to let a little bit more moisture into this container. And so I just go like that. And then the next thing I like to do is add drainage holes in the bottom. Some people like to add the drainage holes first before doing this cut. I've found that either way works for me. And there are different things that you can use to make your holes in your container. So just keep that in mind. You just want to make sure that you're adding enough drainage holes in the bottom. I've seen people use large gallon Ziploc bags to do their winter sowing. Some people have used like lettuce containers, those large lettuce containers. Some people have used totes. There are a lot of different ways you can do this process. Some people have just taken the seeds and scattered them out on the soil and let the plants do what they need to do in nature. And that works very well with perennial seeds typically. But what I like about the winter sowing process is that it's basically a small controlled environment. I'm controlling the water. I'm controlling basically, I can close it on a cold night so I can keep it warm in here. And then also I can then take out the plants and I can place them wherever I want. I also have a backyard plant nursery. So many of these plants end up being sold as part of my backyard plant nursery, which is really nice. Instead of having to buy in plugs and that additional cost that would be added, really this whole process saves me a lot of money that way as well. So now that we've created our mini greenhouse and we have added all the drainage holes here on the top as well as on the bottom, the next thing is to fill this with potting mix. You don't want to use seed starting mix because it will dry out very fast. And when it comes to potting mix, you can use really any potting mix that you want. And I like to make my own potting mix. It's made up of peat moss as well as perlite, but you can use whatever works for you. And the seedlings don't need a lot. They really they need something that they can grow in. And you don't want it to be too heavy, but you also don't want it to be too light. All right, so over here I have a large tote and I already mixed up my potting mix. So we're gonna go ahead and add that into this container here. I'd love to hear if you have done any winter sowing this winter or in previous years, and what has your experience been? And what are you winter sowing? Are you doing perennials? Are you doing annuals? Are you doing a little of everything? Are you doing vegetables? That's the beauty of winter sowing. You can really just sow a whole bunch of different plants, be it flowers or vegetables. The key is planting them at the right time. I would not want to plant, let's say, marigolds or zinnias right now because, again, it's still very cold outside. And the problem is, even if a plant does sprout, if it's an annual in my area and it's going to get killed by a frost or a freeze, then it's too early. I don't want to be starting those yet. So this is the time of year that I like to start all of my perennial seeds. So I added approximately, and it doesn't need to be exact, about 4 inches of potting mix in here. And what I'm doing is I'm just pressing down so that it's, even on all sides. So you can see that's what it looks like. And the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to plant some seeds together. So the 5 seeds that I have here, I collected all of them. We have Queen of the Prairie. And, I've never grown this seed. I've never had this plant actually in my yard. And I got this from a friend of mine. And there are a lot of seeds in there. So when it comes to winter sowing, you can put as many seeds as you want in the milk jug. I typically seed it very heavily and then I prick the plants out and thin them out. The next one I have is sea holly. And I have a lot of sea holly already in my yard that I started from seed, but I got these from my friend as well. And I had so much fun at her house. We just went around her yard and I just collected a whole bunch of seeds. And I'm almost sure that this variety of sea holly or Eryngium is different than the one I have, but we'll find out together. The next one is called a Blackberry Lily, and this also came from my friend's yard. I have Bee Balm, and I wrote down that it's a shorter type of Bee Balm, and it's either a purple color or a pink color. And I'm almost positive I collected these from my sister-in-law's yard. And so I don't have a ton in there. I'll probably end up using all of the seeds in that packet. And I always like to label what the year was that I collected these seeds, because it's just good to know. Seeds typically lose their viability as each year goes by. And then the final seed that I have is a poppy. It's an Oriental. It's either a red color or an orange color. And I also collected these from my friend's house. So I figured together we might as well plant the Blackberry Lily. So let's just do that one first. And that's a very large seed. Now, when I plant my perennial seeds, honestly, I don't look on the internet and read the depth of each of these seeds. It's probably the right thing to do because some seeds require light to germinate. My experience has been if a perennial drops its seeds outside and it self sows or readily sows, something like echinacea or black-eyed Susan, then that tells me that the seed is fine to be placed on the top here. With the Blackberry Lily, it's such a large seed. My experience has been with those really large seeds, you typically want to cover them with some soil. So I'm going to go ahead and I will be covering these blackberry seeds with soil. And I am just placing these, very heavily again in this container. And there's no guarantee that these are going to sprout. I collected them myself. And so you just never know. Typically, if you're going to buy the seeds, there's maybe a higher likelihood. But honestly, if you look at some of my older videos, like from last year for winter sowing, I started a lot of those seeds from seeds that I collected, and they did really well. So you need to, give it a try and see how it works for you. But it typically has worked well for me. And in this container, I probably am planting, if I had to guess, there's maybe about 50 plants in here or 50 seeds in here. So now that the seeds are placed in here, I'm going to go ahead and put a light layer of potting mix. And you can absolutely put pre-moistened potting mix in here. In fact, I would recommend it if you live in an area where it's very dry and also where, it's not as cold. Like here, like I said, it's freezing every single night. So as soon as I put this outside, it's just going to freeze. And that's the reason why I don't pre-moisten the potting mix. I'm just going to moisten it from the top, like probably the first inch or so, and then it's just going to go outside because we still have days where we're going to be getting snow, and if we're not going to get snow, we're going to get rain. And if we're not going to get either, this is still going to be just frozen anyway. And the next thing I like to do is put a label inside. That's optional, but it has worked well for me because sometimes when you label it on the outside, the label ends up just getting worn off from the rain or the snow or the elements. So it's always good to put a label on the inside too. Next, I'm going to add some water in here. This is just a spray pump that I have. And again, I'm just adding enough probably to get about the top 1 inch or so. I love winter sowing. I just think it's such a cool process. It saves a lot of space under my grow lights inside. And typically a lot of perennials need that cold stratification period. So they're getting it naturally outside just by me potting it up like this and putting it outside. So it's kind of a simple, easy process for me. And then I can focus indoors with just placing a lot of my annuals under my grow lights inside. The next thing to do is to seal the container. And I like to use duct tape. I got these 3 big rolls of duct tape pretty inexpensively at Sam's Club, which is really nice. But you don't have to use duct tape. It's just my experience has been the duct tape seems to hold really well. And when I first started winter sowing, I used to put tape all the way around. You don't need to do that. At least that's what I've seen. That just a few pieces, 2, 3 max, will hold this container together. And I'm just adding 1 piece on this side here. I'm going to add another piece over here. And you can see that it holds itself pretty well. And a lot of times if I have to, I just take my nail and just kind of press down a little bit harder just to make sure that it's held in place. And even if there's a little gap here, that's fine. It's not a problem at all. That's just going to allow more water or snow to get into this area here. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm using a garden marker. I found that that works better than a Sharpie. It doesn't seem to wear off. And I'm just going to mark the outside of this with the name of the plant and the date that it got planted. And that's it. It's pretty simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just plant the rest of these seeds in the milk jugs that I have. And then I'm going to bring you outside and I will show you how many milk jugs I've already planted using the winter sowing process. It's a lot. It's cold out here. We're on the south side of my house. And when it comes to placing your milk jugs, you want to make sure you're not placing them anywhere where they're covered. So you don't want them under eaves. You don't want them under a covered porch. You want them out in the open so that they get the rain or the snow that they need. And then also, it's good to place them on a sunnier side. So the south side is the best place, but if you don't have a south side, the next best place where it gets some sun, because that's just going to help the seeds germinate that much faster. And you can see I have quite a few milk jugs started, and I have a little bit of a system here. I'm trying to do it alphabetical so that like type of items are together. Now, I did those ones over there first, and then I worked over here, and now I've been working over here. So not all the plants that are alike are going to be together, but at least within this area, this is all alphabetical. That whole area is alphabetical. I like it because when I'm looking through each of the milk jugs in the springtime, the like type of items, like let's say bee balm, they're all going to sprout around the same time. But the poppies might sprout before or after, but then all the poppies are going to sprout at the same time. So it just makes it easier for me when I'm looking through them if they're a little bit organized, but you don't have to do that. I don't know how many milk jugs I have here, but, and I'm not sure if you can see, but under the snow over there, there's a whole bunch that are covered under the snow, and they will be perfectly fine. My goal is to get the perennials planted within the next month, and then I'm going to move on to some cool flowers and then some vegetables and some annuals. So I'll keep you posted on those, but until then, I need more milk jugs. I hope you're able to get into your garden, be it outdoors or indoors, and just getting your hands dirty with soil. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.